In a dark room, a computer just did something the FBI couldn't do in 60 years. It found them. 2 men, declared dead in 1962, photographed alive decades later. And the software is very, very sure. 63 years ago, 3 men vanished from the most secure prison in America. The government has always said the same thing. They drowned. But nobody ever found a body. And the U.S. Marshals, the ones actually assigned to hunt them, never closed the file. This is the story of the 3 men who may have beaten the only prison that was never supposed to lose. Alcatraz was never meant to be beaten. For 29 years it held the men no other prison could. Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, Robert Stroud, the Birdman. If you landed on the rock, it meant every other cage in America had already failed to hold you. But the walls and the towers were never the real prison. The water was 50 degrees, year-round. Currents strong enough to drag a grown man out toward the open Pacific. And officials said so, loudly and often. Alcatraz is inescapable, a promise and a dare. 36 men tried, in 14 separate attempts, over 29 years. Most were caught within hours. Some were shot on the rocks. 5 were never found, quietly written off as dead, because the alternative was unthinkable. Then came 3 men who made the unthinkable look like a plan. The first was Frank Morris, abandoned by his parents, raised in foster homes, in trouble with the law before he was a teenager. But Morris wasn't muscle. His IQ sat in the genius range, and he had a habit that terrified prison officials. He escaped. Louisiana, Florida, facility after facility. Alcatraz was supposed to be the wall he finally couldn't climb. The other 2 were brothers. John and Clarence Anglin, raised dirt poor in Ruskin, Florida, one of 14 children. As boys, they learned to swim in the cold, heavy currents of the Gulf of Mexico. Hold on to that. It matters later. They grew into bank robbers. What set them apart wasn't violence. It was loyalty. Where one went, the other followed. They'd already tried to break out of the federal penitentiary in Atlanta, together, which is how all 3 ended up here. A genius, and 2 brothers who could outswim the bay, housed in adjoining cells. It may be the single greatest mistake that prison ever made. By late 1961, the whispering had stopped. The digging had started. They had no tools, so they made them. Spoons from the mess hall, sharpened on the concrete into blades. A drill, built from the motor of a stolen vacuum cleaner. In a prison where every fork was counted twice. Every night after lights out, they chipped away, timing the noise to the evening music hour so the guards heard nothing. They hid each hole behind painted cardboard, so convincing that from a few feet away, no guard ever noticed. Behind the cells ran a forgotten utility corridor, unwatched. When the holes were big enough, they slipped through, into a space the prison had forgotten, and above it they built a workshop. The instructions came from a magazine, a 1960 issue of Popular Mechanics, with a feature on how to build a raft. They stole more than 50 raincoats one at a time, over months, hidden under shirts and inside toolboxes. They stitched them by hand into a raft and life vests, sealing every seam with steam from the workshop pipes. They carved paddles. They rigged a stolen accordion into a pump, and then they built the detail that made this escape a legend. Heads, fake human heads. Soap, toilet paper, a paste of concrete dust, and real human hair swept off the barbershop floor, so that when a flashlight swept the cell, 3 men would appear to be sleeping soundly, while they were building a boat above the ceiling June 11th, 1962. Lights out. The guards made their count. They saw 3 men sleeping. They saw the heads. One by one, Morris and the Anglins pushed through the holes and slipped into the corridor. A 4th man, Alan West, couldn't break his vent open in time. They made the hardest decision of the night and left him behind. They climbed a pipe shaft to the roof, out into the cold open air, 50 feet down a rope of braided bed sheets, past the fences, down to the water's edge, in the shadow of the smokestack. There, in the fog, they inflated the raft with the accordion, climbed aboard, and pushed off. The tide was going out. It would either save them or kill them. And then they were gone. At 7 the next morning, a guard reached through the bars and tapped a sleeping head. It rolled off the pillow and onto the floor. By morning, the island was screaming. Sirens, total lockdown, helicopters slicing through the fog, Coast Guard vessels fanning across the bay, police lining every shoreline, the Golden Gate Bridge put under watch. It became one of the largest manhunts the region had ever seen, and the bay gave up clues. Fragments of the raft and a paddle washed ashore on Angel Island, 2 miles from the prison. A torn life vest days later, and near the Golden Gate, a sealed, waterproof packet, the Anglin family's photographs and addresses inside. But the one thing that would have ended the story never came. Bodies, no corpses, no remains, nothing. The FBI studied the cold, studied the currents, and declared it. The men drowned. Case closed. But sit with that packet for a second. Sealed against the water. Family photos. Addresses. Why would 3 drowning men carefully waterproof the things they'd only need if they survived? The FBI said dead. The Anglin family never believed a word of it. If they drowned, why did red roses appear at their mother's grave every Mother's Day for over 20 years, from a cinder no one could ever identify? Why did unsigned Christmas cards keep arriving in handwriting the family swore they recognized? In 1963, a Brazilian newspaper reported 2 American men matching the brothers. In 1975, a family friend returned from a farm in Brazil with a photograph. There's a darker thread, too. A third brother, Alfred, also a criminal, who died in 1964 electrocuted on a prison fence, the report said. The family never accepted it. They believed Alfred was killed for what he knew about his brother's escape. So, decades later, the marshals struck a deal. Exhume Alfred's body, get a clean DNA sample, to test against unidentified bones that had washed ashore after 1962. The results have never been made public. Then, in 2013, a letter, handwritten. My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely. The FBI tested the handwriting, the paper, the fingerprints. The verdict came back one word: inconclusive. And through all of it, one fact the government could never explain away. The U.S. Marshals refused to close this case for 60 years. You don't spend 60 years hunting men you're sure are dead. For decades, that Brazil photograph just sat in a drawer, too blurry to prove anything, too close to throw away. Then the technology caught up, which brings us back to where we started. A dark room, a computer, that photograph. Analysts fed it the 1975 photo side by side with the brothers' 1962 prison intake shots. The software mapped both, measured both, compared the bone beneath the skin, and it came back with a similarity high enough that, in forensic terms, you'd call it strong, not proof. Not courtroom certain, the photo is old, the light is bad, but high enough that the easy answer, they drowned, forget it, no longer fits. A strong match. A letter no one could disprove, a waterproofed packet, roses on a grave, an exhumed brother, a case still open. None of it is proof. All of it points the same way. Outro, the true cliffhanger. The marshals will tell you the case is still open. They'll tell you there's no reason to believe 3 men like this ever became quiet, law-abiding citizens. And they'll remind you, if they're alive, they'd be in their 90s now. Not gone. Just old. There's a story that the warden asked years later if the men could have survived, looked out at the water and said, "You hear the wind? You see the water? Do you think you could make it?" But of course, a man smart enough to beat Alcatraz would also be smart enough never to answer that question out loud. So look at that screen one more time. 2 old men on a farm, a number the machine is very sure about. You decide, did the Bay win? Or did they? Tell me in the comments. I read them all. And if you want the next impossible escape almost nobody knows about, it's right here. I'll see you there.